Zandala forever.
Wait, what?
Zandala forever.
Best expansion ever.
Zandala forever.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, it's Frosty and Remedy with our first video ever, and today we will be reviewing the shiny and new World of Warcraft expansion, Battle for Azeroth. Along with a new level cap of 120, this expansion introduces a plethora of new features, like new leveling zones, dungeons, quests, island expeditions, and new ways to PvP. We will cover all of this and more to create our final verdict. We will score based on the four following categories: new zones, new features, story, and endgame. Before we begin, I just wanted to say thanks for clicking on this video, and we hope you enjoy our review of Blizzard's freshest take on the war waging between the Horde and Alliance, which if that's something you're interested in, then this expansion is the one for you.
Stand as one for the Alliance!
To start things off, I'll be going over the zones in Battle for Azeroth, or BFA for short. Unlike previous expansions, BFA scraps shared Alliance Horde leveling zones and goes for a more unique approach, offering each faction 3 unique home zones. At first I was skeptical about this because of the potential decrease in zone quality or size, but after playing through each of the 6 new zones, I came to realize that this was not the case. In fact, the 3 Alliance leveling zones combined felt just as long, if not longer, than all 5 of Legion's shared quest zones. As for the zones themselves, I have never felt as compelled to sightsee in previous expansions as I felt in BFA. Tiergard Sound feels like a direct extension of the Eastern Kingdoms, offering varying towns and forests, while also lending itself to the seafaring theme of the Alliance's pirate-riddled questlines. Compared to Stormsong Valley and Drustvar, however, Tiergard did feel somewhat muddled in its themes, as if it tried to do too much with one piece of land. Stormsong Valley, on the other hand, is a beautifully green and lush landscape where the Kultiran Storm Sages are trained. I couldn't help but be reminded of the vibrant greens from Burning Crusade and Warlord of Draenor's versions of Nagrand as I quested through Quillborn-infested fields and murdered that snake from Tremors over and over. My all-time favorite zone out of all 6 of the new Alliance and Horde zones is Drustvar. Consider Grizzly Hill's aesthetic, mixed in with the spooky vibes from the vanilla Alliance zone of Duskwood, and you have Drustvar. Start with witches, mix in some wicker beasts, and add a touch of curses, and you have the best zone I've played in yet to date, not to mention the hauntingly beautiful soundtrack that accompanies you on your journey. As for Horde zones, they felt somehow more unique from one another than the zones of their enemy in the Alliance. Zuldazar, Nazmir, and Vol'dun all feel very different from each other, with varying landscapes and racial locale. Vol'dun, for example, is a desert zone, equipped with their very own race of fox people called Volpera, as well as everything else you'd expect in a zone ruled by snake men. Rolling dunes, and even a quaint oasis hidden away beneath the sands. If you're a fan of caravan questlines, Vol'dun will be to your liking. And then there's Nazmir. Similar to Drustvar on the spooky scale, Nazmir is a vast swamp zone, populated by all sorts of creepy crawlies and even blood trolls. Some of the landscapes in Nazmir simply took my breath away, and I cannot wait to spend more time here in the future. Lastly is Zuldazar, a lush rainforest zone inhabited by the Zandalari trolls, and similar to the type of zones you'd see trolls live within in the past. Zuldazar is massive, housing a variety of dinosaur-type monsters and various small islands off of its coastline. Before I give a score for this section of the review, I'd like to give special mention to Dazar'alor and Boralis, the Horde and Alliance capital cities for Battle for Azeroth. These 2 player hubs are the best the game has to offer. On top of being larger than life and feeling truly lived in, these highly populated areas are so well realized and beautifully designed that I couldn't not mention them. Think Suramar, but actually fun. Sorry. All jokes aside, I really enjoyed questing through BFA's 6 new leveling zones, and give this section a score of 9 out of 10. This is Frosty signing off, handing it over to my good friend Remedy for the next portion of this review.
Hey guys, it's Remedy here, and today we're going to be talking about the features of the new World of Warcraft expansion, Battle for Azeroth. The main features I will be touching on in this video are War Mode, Island Expeditions, streamlined PvP talents, guild changes and the new Communities function, as well as covering what we know so far about Warfronts. Firstly, War Mode does away with traditional PvP servers and replaces them with an option to turn world PvP on and off. This feature is helpful to those who wish to avoid PvP while in the world, but also grant extra rewards for those willing to take the risk. The extra rewards for playing with War Mode on are increased experience while leveling, and 10% increased resources like gold and artifact power. We found that leveling with War Mode on made leveling feel quite a bit faster, letting us reach level cap well before finishing all 3 zones. When playing in War Mode, the game does not do a great job of accommodating the need to group up and join others in certain activities. Joining a group through the LFG tool does not limit players in separate War Modes from joining groups together, rendering large objectives impossible to complete, and trying to use meeting stones at a dungeon or raid entrance requires 2 players from within the same War Mode, or else half the party is phased from the other. Next up, we have Island Expeditions, which are a new look on scenarios exclusive to Battle for Azeroth. These 3-player excursions can be played in PvE in the 3 traditional difficulties, normal, heroic, and mythic for increasing rewards, or even tackled in a PvP mode where you can compete against 3 enemy players instead of computer-controlled AI. While in Island Expeditions, you will traverse one of many differing islands, racing the enemy team to collect a specified amount of Azerite from nodes, quests, and of course, big monsters, all while thwarting the enemy along the way. The only reward for playing this mode seems to be Azerite power, as well as a weekly Azerite cache for completing a certain number of expeditions per week. Moving forward, PvP talents have been completely streamlined in Battle for Azeroth, tossing away the old method of talent progression to instead allow players to choose from 3 unique talents out of a large list. This feature feels easier to manage and really lets the player customize their character on a new level. The best part of these new talents is how they synergize with War Mode. Not only working in arenas and battlegrounds, these talents actually become active while you quest in the open world as long as War Mode is enabled. This next feature, Communities, adds a new way to connect with fellow players without being on the same realm as them, similar to communities in other Blizzard games like Diablo. So now, instead of just joining a guild on your character, you can also join a community with players from all around Azeroth, whether they join on a character or with their Battle.net account, regardless of faction. The downside to this new feature, however, is the change it brings to the already existing guild function. Since communities run off the Battle.net social tab, and guilds are now also lumped in with that, the power that guildmasters once had is now far less, taking away certain permissions like officer notes, creating guild events, setting messages a day, and so on. This new feature feels like a step forward in some ways, but also sends guilds one step back. Lastly, on the topic of new features is Warfremz. Cycling every 2 weeks, these 20-man scenarios are essentially a throwback to the days of Warcraft 3 and the original build and deploy style of gameplay. Awarding a 370 piece on their first completion, followed by 340s from then on, these new and exciting events feel like a fresh and new take on the idea of Battle for Azeroth as you finally battle it out against the Horde in this all-out war on the newly remodeled Arathi Highlands. The story does feel great, fighting alongside Alliance commanders to claim objectives and amass resources to counter the encroaching Horde adversaries, unless you're the type to just AFK and let everyone else do the work for you, which unfortunately actually works. And when you're not fighting for the fate of Azeroth, you get to fill an exceedingly long contribution bar, farm rares in Arathi, which feels more or less like a time gate. While fun, Warfremz could have probably been delivered a little better. I'll hand it over to Frosty now to go over the story of Battle for Azeroth.
Moving forward with the review, I will be going over the story present in Battle for Azeroth. When you first ever play World of Warcraft, you are greeted with the character creation screen, which displays a conflict between a blue and red team. Though most expansions don't focus on the war waging between both factions, they in fact usually end up working together to down some big baddie at the end of the X-Pack. Battle for Azeroth does this differently, however, and finally takes us back to the classic roots of Horde versus Alliance, and personally, that's something I couldn't be more excited for. To avoid spoilers, I won't be discussing the actual events that take place on Kul Tiras and Zandalar, but instead I'll go over the story leading up to Battle for Azeroth's first questline. So BFA begins on the brimming edge of a fresh war between 2 massive factions, causing each of them to seek new alliances with the Kul Tiran humans and the Zandalari trolls. But what got us to this point? Why exactly are these 2 factions waging such violent warcraft on one another? Let me explain. At the end of Legion, the heroes of Azeroth travel through space to fight the corrupted world soul of Argus and free the essence of the Titan Pantheon. Upon doing so, Sargeras is pulled from his attempt at invading Azeroth, but before he is jailed away by Illidan, he plunges his massive sword straight into Azeroth, corrupting the planet for as long as the sword remains empowered. Azeroth's heroes have to then sacrifice their artifact weapons to absorb the corruption from the blade and save the planet. This stops the poisoning effect on Azeroth and slows her death, but she is still bleeding. Her blood takes on the form of an immensely powerful resource dubbed Azerite, which is bubbling up all over the planet. Naturally, the Horde and Alliance wish to gather as much Azerite as possible before their enemy, for various different reasons. This is where the war takes a jarring turn. During the events of the pre-patch at the end of Legion, both factions sent large forces to Silithus, where the blade stabbed into Azeroth, to fight over the Azerite there. Sylvanas, the Horde warchief, decided to take advantage of the situation and hunt down Malfurion Stormrage, the leader of the Night Elves, while the Alliance's main forces are preoccupied. When things don't go exactly as planned and Malfurion slips away, the Banshee Queen thinks up another way to break the Alliance. She burns down the Night Elven home territory and world tree Teldrassil. This causes a ripple effect among not only the Alliance, but also the Horde, as the Alliance prepares a retaliation which erupts into a full-out attack on Lordaeron City, where Sylvanas leads her people, the Forsaken. Now that the Alliance and Horde are literally at each other's throats, hunting Azeroth and killing one another, they turn to the new continents of Kultiris and Zandalar for new allies, who happen to also hold the world's two most powerful naval fleets. What I love about this new conflict is that it sets up features like War Mode and Azerite armor to feel very relevant and important to your progression through the story. There is nothing more satisfying than gathering Azerite on enemy territory when suddenly you are ambushed and need to fight for your life against an enemy faction. As you play through the pre-patch events and all of BFA, you are gently carried through the story by some of the best cutscenes, voice acting, and Blizzard writing I've ever played, resulting in some of the best character dialogue to date.
I should have killed you when last we met.
How rude, sister. You're a guest in my home.
Your home? You desecrate that throne with your filth! Enough!
All of this culminates to create a story that's easy to get behind and easy to follow. If I had to consider a negative aspect to the story in BFA, it would be that this war seems forced and somewhat over nothing when there are many more pressing matters for the Alliance and Horde to deal with. Other than that, I give the story in BFA an 8.5 out of 10. Let's move on to the final portion of the review.
For the final part of our 1 month review, I will be discussing the endgame in Battle for Azeroth. First of all, reaching top level unlocks world quests as well as the option to sign up for heroic and mythic difficulty dungeons. Since endgame relies on raising your character's item level so that you may pursue more challenging group content, the best place to begin is world quests. Completing 4 world quests for the particular day's Reputation Emissary will grant you increased rewards from gear upgrades and Azerite power, all the way to gold and war resources for your now simplified table missions. Once you reach the appropriate item level, you will begin queuing for heroic dungeons, eventually becoming strong enough to group up for mythic dungeons and even mythic plus. Once you feel you're up to the task, it's time to tackle Uldir, BFA's first raid zone. This will require a group of at least 10 players to cooperate and coordinate with one another to earn the best gear the game has to offer. Unfortunately, other than this traditional tried and true method, BFA fails at doing anything very different at its end game. While it is entertaining, we just wish that some of the new features like Warfronts and Island Expeditions could serve a larger purpose towards the end game, rather than just leveling your Azerite upgrades and gearing your alts. One notable change is the addition of Azerite gear, a replacement to the artifact weapons of Legion. Meant to enhance the user's gameplay, these talent choices are now attached to certain pieces of armor. Unlocking them requires the same artifact grind of the previous expansion, which now feels less rewarding, due to the traits not feeling very impactful on your gameplay as they did in Legion. For now, that's all we have to report, though endgame is always evolving, and already we look ahead to a promising future as the newly announced Tides of Vengeance patch draws closer, threatening to give us loads more to do. At this point, I would score Battle for Azeroth's endgame with a 7 out of 10. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this endgame recap, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now, with all of our sub-scoring sections out of the way, I wanted to make a point to mention that no WoW expansion is perfect, and that Remedy and I are really enjoying BFA, looking past all of the poor design choices and persistent bugs. With that being said, we are giving Battle for Azeroth a score of 7.5 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, drop a like, and leave a comment. It would really encourage us to continue releasing more gaming content. Thanks for watching.